Welcome. Welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy. Today, I want to talk about the role of parents and how to work with parents. One of the things that I found over the last, I would say, probably I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I have made some mistakes along the way, just like everybody else. And I learned a lot too. And so, one of the things that I want to do today is share some of the things that I've learned about working with parents to help you make the shifts that you need in order to work more effectively with parents. And one of the things that we've learned over the last several decades is there's a lot of information about neuroscience and attachment has come out. And I think as play therapists, this gives us a lot of really valuable information to one, better understand our clients, and two, better understand the role of parents in the work that we do with their children. And I think there's a lot that it has to show us. I know that information actually is pretty pivotal in the shifts that I made when I started making decisions about parents and children and the work that I'm going to be doing. So that influenced my decision making about how to work with parents. And there are some kind of foundational things kind of going back to the roots of the question, I think, that are going to make a difference when you kind of stop to think about these things. So that's what I want to talk about today, how to work with parents in play therapy, just some couple of things that I've learned along the way to share with you so that you can think about how this influences the decisions that you're making when you're working with clients in the play therapy process. And how are you working with their parents? How are you interacting with their parents? I think most play therapists will tell you, most child and adolescent therapists will tell you, working with parents are important to their children. And yet then we tend to take more of an individual counseling focus and really don't engage parents in a really intentional way that gets a lot of traction for their children. So a couple of things to think about. That's what we're going to talk about today. Just how are parents important? Like, are they important? Why are they important? And how does that influence your frame of reference? And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then two, what's the role of parents? So that's what we are going to talk about today. If you're joining me live, I would love to know who's here. Go ahead and post your name in the comments, where you're from, how are you working with parents, and what play therapy model are you using? That would be great to know as well. So if you're watching on the replay for the live stream episode today, I would love to know who's been watching. What are your thoughts? Post your questions. The only thing that I ask people is don't post specific questions about your clients, because it is a public format and we want to make sure to keep that private. General questions, feel free to ask. And so I'm just going to go over a couple of things today, but here's the thing. There are so many things about working with children and adolescents and engaging their parents. So that's why I created an online course, working with parents. So it's called Getting Grounded, Partnering with Parents in Play Therapy. And I'm going to talk more about that at the end. in case you want a lot more support than I'll be talking about in today's episode. But I did want to pass along some information. I find the topic of working with parents is probably one of the most challenging, I'll say, things for play therapists. And it actually makes sense when you think about it, because how many play therapy trainings have you taken, and how many of them focus on the work that you're doing with your clients? Most of the trainings that we get, and this is even true of graduate school, most of the education focuses on adults. In graduate school, it doesn't focus on children. Maybe you had a class, maybe you had a family systems class, but it didn't really give a lot of focus on working with children, and not a lot of focus on how to really engage parents and bring them on as your partner in the change process, how to help parents be the therapeutic agents of change for their children. And so that's really one of the reasons I created the course. So I'll talk more about that, because there isn't really a lot out there. And I really wanted to create a comprehensive course that answered pretty much most of your questions, to give you a good, solid foundation. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. Let's see. Somebody left a comment. Oh, hey, Trisha. So Trisha, I work with parents a lot in my school-based therapy. Not all of us do, but I really think it's important to try to get them in as often as I can. I think that's awesome, Trisha. And, you bring up a good point as well, which is, if you're working in the school system, it can be even a little more challenging to engage parents. And I think what you're doing to really make that concerted effort to do that is going to pay off for your clients and make a big difference in the outcomes that you get for your clients. So I think that's awesome that you're engaging the parents even in the school setting, because that can be a little bit challenging at times. So let's get started for today. Are parents important in play therapy? What would you answer? So Trisha's already answered that. What would you guys say? Are parents important in the play therapy process? Think about that. It seems like such a simple question and kind of a no-brainer, right? Like, are parents important? If you're a child and adolescent therapist, the likelihood you've said yes. If you're a play therapist, the likelihood you've said yes to that is probably pretty high. But maybe you haven't really stopped to think about that. And I think unless you can answer this question, then it's going to be hard to move forward. So that's why I wanted to make sure to bring this part up, which is, are parents important? Can you do play therapy without parent engagement? And by engagement, I mean that you're meeting with them regularly, that you're having conversations with them, and they are kind of giving you feedback and you're giving them feedback. Are parents important in play therapy? So type your questions in the comments. I'd love to see what you guys have to say about that. Here's why that's an important question to ask. And I go over this in a lot more depth in my course, but here's the thing to think about. Most of us come out of graduate school with, here's what I call it. It's either an individual counseling orientation or a family systems counseling orientation. If here in the United States, we have marriage and family therapy programs, we have clinical mental health counseling programs, we have clinical social work programs, and we have clinical psychology programs. Unless you're a marriage and family therapist, the likelihood that you have really had a lot of training looking systemically at the child is probably pretty slim. Most of us came out of graduate school, and the trainings we get are more an individual focus. So the whole focus is on the child. And in fact, the Association for Play Therapy has published best practices. And in the best practices, the Association for Play Therapy says, who is the client? The child is the client. So, how do we balance these two things? And when you go on to read further in the best practices, they will talk about the role of parents and the importance of parents. So they do address that. Now, and I agree. I mean, who is the client? The child is the client, right? And what does that mean? What that means is the focus of the interventions, the focus of the outcomes you're trying to accomplish are for the benefit of the child. They're not for the benefit of the parents. Does that mean we don't work with parents? Does that mean we don't address issues with parents? No. That's going to come up when you do your work with parents. Unless you can answer the question of who is the client and what does that mean in terms of the role of the parents, you're probably going to get a little bit lost in the decision-making process. So here's what we know. If we're looking at the client as just the client is the child, and we're using an individual focus, we're saying the child is the client. If we are using a family systems lens, then we say the family is the client. And this is where I'm probably going to possibly commit a little heresy. So is it one or the other? And I would say no. I would say it's both. And here's what I mean by that. I'm going to tell you a little story about my graduate school. So this is over 30 years ago now. I was in my policy class. Some of you might have heard this story before. I was in policy class. So I don't know if you're like most clinical people, policy class in social work. I didn't understand probably 95% of what my professor was talking about. It made absolutely no sense to me. I could have cared less. That wasn't why I went to grad school. That I didn't go to grad school to learn policy. I didn't want to be a policy writer. That just made my head spin. Nothing about me wanted anything to do with policy back at that point in my life. So just getting started, wanting to make a difference in the lives of children and families, because I'd always wanted to work with children and families. I just wanted to know what to do to help my clients, but I had to take this policy class. Snoresville, I thought. Anyways, the professor is actually really good. He said two things in that policy class that I still remember today, over 30 years later. Almost, I would say I'm coming up on 35 years later. And back in the day when I went to grad school, so it was a classroom, the big walls, and it was chalkboard. Back in the day, it was chalkboard. And so one whole wall of the classroom was a chalkboard, and then the wall that connected with it, that was a big chalkboard. So imagine this L-shaped chalkboard that went the whole width of each wall. It was massive, this chalkboard. And so he was talking about policy. I don't even remember what he was saying about policy, but I remember this. And I look at this clinically. He took a piece of chalk from one end of one wall, and he drew a horizontal line all the way down one chalkboard and adjoining it to the next chalkboard. It was this massive horizontal line. And then he went up to one kind of random point in the chalkboard and put this dot. And what he said was, this line represents the life of your client. So from your client's birth to death, this is the life of your client. And this dot represents you. This dot represents you in the life of your client. You are a dot in the life of your client. And that stuck with me. So what does that mean? We're dots in the lives of our clients. Our clients exist within a family. Who's going to be most of that client's life? It's going to be their family, hopefully, not always, hopefully. So who has the most influence on your client? Family, parents, sibling, family. I always want to be a good dot in the life of my client. In fact, I hope my dot makes enough of a positive impact that it helps to shift my client into a more positive and healthy trajectory. And for kids, we enter into their lives much earlier in that line, right? So we show up much earlier for kids. So we hope to be a positive influence in the lives of our clients to make an impact. If we don't look at the child within the context of the family, and I would say the whole family system, at least with the parents, then we have missed the point that we're not going to be with them for that entire line. We're a dot. So are parents important? Yes. Is the child the client? Yes. Is the family system and parents in particular important? Yes. And we also know from decades of research, especially attachment research, which for me, when I began to read about attachment and neuroscience, so I'm a family systems person. My graduate school training wasn't individual counseling. My graduate school training, we only learned about family systems. So I always say that I'm a licensed clinical social worker with the heart of a marriage and family therapist. And I value that because I've always looked at children within the context of their family system. I look systemically. That's my clinical orientation, is to look systemically. But then what I want to do is I want to kind of drill down into my client, understand my client within the context of their family system, and looking at it through the lens of attachment and neuroscience really helps me understand my client within the context of these primary relationships, and helps me understand the influence of children and the influence of family on children and adolescents, and most particularly parents, and the role of parents, or the impact of the absence of parents. If I look at this from an attachment standpoint, then I begin to see what's going on with that child. I also, because I'm using that lens, now fully understand who needs to be part of the healing process. Some kind of caregiver, some kind of caregiver in their lives. If children aren't living with their biological parents, who's functioning in that role, and how can I get them involved? And that's easier said than done sometimes. So in my course, I go into that a lot. Like, how do you work with challenging parents? And using an attachment and neuroscience lens gives you the theoretical framework to come up with strategies to engage parents and how to do that. And the role of parents. It helps you come up with strategies for what you're going to do in the sessions, how parents are going to be involved in the sessions. What are you going to say to parents? What are you not going to say to parents? When you meet with parents, how are you going to meet with them? What are you going to do? What's the focus going to be? So Those are all questions that are answered based first and foremost on understanding, are parents important? Yes, because when they don't show up, or when you have a hard time getting them to be involved, or when you're working through some challenging issues, it'll be important to keep that kind of grounding of when you want to give up and say to yourself, oh, I only want to work with kids. I don't want to work with the parents, because it's really, really challenging at times. Kind of helps you hang in there, helps me hang in there, and take a step back and think, one, and I get, am I getting a bad attitude about this? Let me check my attitude. Let me check my bias. And then let me take a step back and look at this clinically, logically. Let me look at it from my theoretical lens. Let me look and see what's going on. Are parents important? Why are they important? Okay, so then how am I going to do this? And that kind of helps me move forward. But the fundamental question I think that we have to get settled with is, are parents important in the play therapy process? And then the second thing with that is, what's your theoretical model? And how is your theoretical model influencing how you are working with parents and how you're engaging parents and what their role is? Which brings us to the next question is, okay, so we've settled it in our minds. Parents are important when we're working with children in play therapy. We've got that settled. So now the question is, what's their role? What is their role in the play therapy process? Kind of goes back to also your theoretical model. How does your model influence the way in which parents are going to be involved in the change process? But here's the thing. I like using a neuroscience and attachment lens, because to me, I can apply that lens to whatever theoretical model people are using. Like child-centered play therapy, that's kind of my foundational theoretical model. Child-centered play therapy means, if I'm using child-centered play therapy, it means parents are not in the sessions. It means I'm meeting with them separately without the child present, and I'm doing a lot of that parent coaching along the way. If I'm using theraplay is parent-child focused. The child and the parent are going to be in the session together, and you're going to be working on that attachment relationship. That's the focus. So then the decisions are going to be made around, how am I helping to facilitate this, building a secure attachment between this client and their parent. If I'm using Adlerian play therapy looks at the child within context of their system. It's their whole system. So family system, school system, wherever they're involved in other activities. Adlerian play therapy looks at children within the context. And so then you have a whole variety of ways to integrate parents. You could do parent sessions, you can do parent-child sessions, you can do family sessions, you can do all of those things. So what role do parents have in play therapy is going to be influenced by your theoretical model. Ultimately, though, parents, here's my view, especially if I'm looking at this from an attachment and neuroscience lens. And if you think back to my analogy of being a dot on that big old line, I want to be a good dot. But who is involved in the lives of their child? Parents. So I see the role of the play therapist as helping parents become the therapeutic agents of change for their children. How do we engage parents to be part of the healing? And parents want to be part of that healing. They don't know how, which is why they're bringing their child to you. They need you to help them figure out how to be that therapeutic agent of change. What we know from neuroscience is that that attachment relationship influences the beliefs that we form about ourselves, the beliefs that we form about other people, the beliefs that we form about relationships and how those work. Those all have a big influence, or those are all influenced by those attachment relationships that children have. We also know, so it influences self-concept, it influences how we show up and how we navigate relationships. It also influences the ability to regulate emotions. So that ability to develop self-regulation first begins in the child's ability to use their caregiver for co-regulation. So parents have a key role in the development of the emotion regulation circuitry for their children. It doesn't mean, again, it does not mean parents have to be perfect. That is not even possible. What we're helping parents to accomplish is being good enough parents, showing up more often than not in an attuned, attached, and regulated way to help their children develop that emotion regulation circuitry, to formulate a generally positive sense of self overall, where they feel confident, they've got some resiliency. Again, people hit bumps in life. So there's this, so the ability to use these attachment relationships to help children navigate through those bumps is really, really important. In fact, I actually just got a recent book. I wasn't planning on doing this, but if you're watching on the live stream, you can see this, or if you're watching on the replay, I don't know if you guys have seen, there's a new book out. It's called this, it's by Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate. It's called Hold On to Your Kids: Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Peers. I mean, I just started reading. It's really good. And I'm actually going to use it for some more of my courses. But what is that saying, right? We need to help parents matter more than peers. One of the things that we're seeing through the research is the impact of social media on children, and the bullying that can, cyberbullying, that social media, peer relationships. Children need their parents. They need that attachment relationship. So if you're an adolescent therapist, and I'm working on my next course, which is Play Therapy with Adolescents. I'm revamping a course that I had out last year, and I took it down because I want to revamp it. But I've been asking people, hey, what do you want in this course? What do you want in a course about working with adolescents? And here's what I get back. A lot of the feedback is self-esteem, dealing with social media, dealing with bullying, how do we help them navigate through that? Well, in my mind, if you're not also helping to facilitate that strong relationship with parents, if you're not helping to reconnect kids and their parents, then you're missing a big, big, big piece of the puzzle. And I'm going to go back to my big, long horizontal line that my professor wrote. We've got to engage parents. We have got to support parents. We've got to figure out how to help them be involved in the change process for their children. We've got to help parents become the therapeutic agents of change. And that is easier said than done sometimes, especially when they start getting into adolescence and they don't have a good relationship with their parents. And whatever we can do to facilitate some healing there, we know that's going to help with their resiliency and help with them developing a more positive sense of themselves to be able to navigate through those challenges in life. Parents come in all the time. I ask them, what do you want to be better for your child? And they always, more often than not, a lot of what they say is, I just want my child to be happy. And my response is usually, that's not a realistic goal, because nobody can be happy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's just not even possible. What we want to help your child do is to develop resiliency. How do they develop that resiliency? Because out of resiliency comes a positive sense of self and the ability to navigate challenges when they come along. And parents are part of that role. That's the important piece that we really need to make sure we're incorporating into the play therapy process. So, what is their role? Their role is to be the therapeutic agent of change for their child. And how you facilitate that process to help parents become the therapeutic agents of change for their child is going to be influenced by your theoretical model. So that is it for today. Let me just do a quick recap. Are parents important in play therapy? Yes. Parents are the attachment figures in the lives of their clients. And we know from decades of research that attachment figures have a tremendous impact on their children. And so parents they play a key role in children's developing sense of self, their ability to navigate relationships, their ability to, figure out how to navigate people and make sense of people. So yes, parents are important. And even though the child is considered the client, we need to look at child in context of their systems. And how are we going to work with the systems in that child's life? And most specifically, how are we working with parents in that child's life? And brings us to the next question is, what is the role of parents in play therapy? The role of parents in play therapy is to become the therapeutic agent of change for their child. And how are you engaging parents to help parents co-regulate their child's emotions, how to help them deal with the stressors in their lives, cope with those negative things that are going on? How are parents able to be attuned? Are they reading the cues of their child? Are they able to help their child experience that felt sense of safety? How are they navigating through conflict? How are they doing the repair work? All of those things. Children exist within the context of families, and they rely on their parents for their survival. So it's important to conceptualize how parents are involved in their children's play therapy treatment to be that therapeutic agent of change. And I would say both parents, not just one parent. They live in a two-parent household, or maybe parents aren't together. The more you can engage, because it's not always possible, but the more you can engage both sets of parents, that's important. And if children aren't living with their biological parents, engaging the caregivers who are acting in that parental role, how are you engaging them in the change process? So that is it for today. Tricia says, I just ordered the audio book for the book you showed. Yeah, I just started reading it last night, or not last night, the day before. It looks pretty good, actually. The only thing is, it's got really teeny tiny little print. So the audio book is probably going to be awesome. So anyway, yeah, I'm super excited about reading it. There's another one while you mention it now. The one that I'm going to show you now is an oldie but a goodie. It's called The Second Family, dealing with peer power, pop culture, the wall of science, silence, and other challenges of raising today's teens. So if you're working with teens, this one's an oldie but a goodie. This one's really, really good. It's by Dr. Ron Taffel, Taffel, Dr. Ron Taffel. It's called The Second Family. This one, I had to buy a whole new copy because I don't know what happened to my first copy. It's all about it's attachment. We're wired to connect. We're wired for relationship. If children can't connect to their first family, which is their parents and their family, then they're going to create what he calls a second family. And that's going to be peer related. And they're going to have more influence than the first family, which kind of brings us back to the other book, which is Hold On to Your Kids, right? Why parents really need to matter. And so to answer that question, yes, parents do matter. And what is their role? Their role is to be the therapeutic agents of change. So if you are interested in really developing your skills for working with parents, maybe you need more help with that. Maybe you need a framework, maybe tips and strategies, even when you're working with challenging parents, even when you're working with parents in high conflict divorce. That is the course I have created. I created this course to be comprehensive so that it answered the questions that I usually get asked. In fact, I asked all of the members of my Play Therapy Academy. So Play Therapy Academy is my online consultation program to help to help child and adolescent therapists learn how to use play therapy. So and in it we have courses. This course will be in Play Therapy Academy, but if you're not in Play Therapy Academy and you don't need Play Therapy Academy, it's still available. So I asked them, what do you want in a course? And so they gave me their whole big long list of how to work with parents, how to set up the sessions, what do you say to parents, how do you handle parents who want to be part of the session, or children who don't want to separate, or how do you work with parents who are challenging and it's hard to get them to engage, how do you work with high conflict divorce parents. So the focus is, one, really honing in on using a neuroscience and attachment lens. So first and foremost, we really need to understand why parents are important. We're going to ground that in theory. We're going to ground that in research. I go over a ton of research about best strategies and how to get engagement. What does the research say about that? I go over cultural factors. How do you do the decision making about what's going on with your client and the role of parents and culture, and how do you work with that? How do you work with families whose culture is different than yours, and how do you maintain that cultural intelligence and cultural sensitivity to be respectful and get really good outcomes? So it's a really exhaustive course. I basically put my 30 plus years of experience, my 30 plus years of learning in this course so that you can kind of have a fast track to get more engagement and get better outcomes, helping parents become the therapeutic agents of change for their children. So if you're interested in that course, it's called Getting Grounded, Partnering with Parents in Play Therapy. If you go over to my website, which is rhplaytherapytraining.com, go to the courses page and click on Getting Grounded, Partnering with Parents in Play Therapy. So that is it for today. Also, if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, I do have a couple of openings. Play Therapy Academy is my online program where we meet twice a month. We do case consultation. We do case presentations. We like really dive into what's going on. You get my 30 years experience, 30 plus, as well as all of the experience of the therapists in the program with you. There are courses. All of the Getting Grounded courses are included. We have a group chat so that you get support in between the session. There's other bonuses as well in there. So if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, then go over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. Go on the supervision page and then scroll till you see Play Therapy Academy. Click on there, schedule a free 30-minute video call with me to see if it's a good fit for you. Why keep struggling, feeling like you don't know what you're doing and worrying that you're doing the wrong thing when you can get help? And the group is amazing. In fact, Trisha is in my group. So all the links for the website, for the course, for Play Therapy Academy, all those links are in the comments. So click on that. Next week, I'm going to go live on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. Wednesday is the federal holiday celebrating Juneteenth. So I decided to take that day off. And so I'm going to go live on Tuesday, June 18th instead of Wednesday, June 19th. So I will see you next week. Bye for now.